Snow was falling softly over Aspen. When Kazuo Nakamura stepped out of the private car, the collar of his gray coat turned up against the wind. The valet didn't rush over. No one did. Around him, guests in designer ski jackets were ushered into the grand entrance of Snowcap Ridge Resort, with practiced charm, greeted by name, escorted with smiles, offered glasses of champagne. Kazuo stood still for a moment, his suitcase in one hand, watching it all with unreadable eyes. No one recognized him. And that was exactly what he wanted. Inside the lobby, the warmth hit immediately gold, lighting the scent of wood smoke and faint piano music playing from hidden speakers. Kazuo's shoes made no sound on the marble floor as he walked in. His suitcase, worn but well kept, rolled behind him like a quiet memory. He looked out of place here, surrounded by guests wrapped in luxury, their laughter bouncing off the chandeliers. He liked it that way. For 30 years, Kazuo had been the face behind one of the most powerful hospitality empires in the world. Morita International. 64 resorts, 5 continents, and a private network of ultra-luxury properties designed for the kind of people who never asked for prices. People like the ones around him now. People who, like him, had once believed money could fix most things. It couldn't. Not betrayal. Not grief. Not the sound of your own voice echoing in too many empty rooms. Kazuo took a seat near the fireplace and watched the line at the front desk. He'd been traveling for 16 hours, Tokyo to LAX, then Denver, then Aspen by car. He could have used his name called ahead, arrived by helicopter. But he didn't want anyone to know who he was. Not today. Today, he wanted to disappear. He'd booked this stay under a different name. Not to deceive, just to observe. He wanted to know how his staff treated the invisible ones, the ones who didn't tip with gold cards or walk in trailing personal assistants, the quiet travelers, the ones who were told, "Wait over there," while someone else was handed warm towels and upgrades. Because lately, Kazuo had started to feel like one of them. He glanced at the check-in line again. It hadn't moved. A family in matching down jackets was ushered forward while others waited. The front desk manager, a tall man in a navy blazer, smiled too wide and moved too fast. Behind him, staff buzzed like bees, efficient, polished, and entirely uninterested in the older man sitting alone near the fire. Kazuo adjusted the sleeve of his coat. The lining had come loose. He hadn't noticed it until the airport. It was fine. He didn't care about the coat, or the shoes, or the fact that he hadn't shaved in 3 days. These things, once carefully selected by assistants, no longer mattered. What mattered was the silence in his chest. The dull ache left by a nephew he'd trusted. A company board that had smiled while they voted him out. Early retirement, they had called it. A clean transition, all planned behind his back. Kazuo didn't fight it. He simply packed a bag and left. He stood slowly and walked toward the front desk. The manager glanced up as Kazuo approached, then immediately looked over his shoulder. "Sir, the line is behind you," he said, not unkindly, but with the dismissive tone of someone practiced in saying no without saying it. "I have a reservation," Kazuo replied, his English gentle and deliberate. The manager nodded toward the queue. "Of course. Just wait your turn, and someone will be right with you." Kazuo nodded. Yes. He returned to the back of the line. One guest turned to glance at him, eyed the scuffed suitcase, the coat, the soft posture, and then turned back to her phone. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. More guests arrived. Some were greeted with hugs by staff. Others were swept away by bellhops. The line barely moved. Kazuo remained where he was, holding his place with the same patience that had built an empire. He didn't blame them. Not really. Appearances mattered in this world. The wealthy weren't supposed to look tired, or ordinary, or unsure. They were supposed to arrive in town cars and carry nothing heavier than a leather passport holder. Kazuo was carrying grief. The woman ahead of him stepped forward. The line inched forward. He was next. He exhaled slowly. Then just as he reached the counter, a new guest appeared behind him, young, loud, wearing sunglasses indoors, and was immediately waved forward. Kazuo stepped back without a word. The manager didn't look at him. Didn't say, "Sorry for the wait." Just turned to the next person with a grin, like he'd been waiting all day to greet someone important. Kazuo's fingers tightened around the handle of his suitcase. He remembered building his first hotel, remembered greeting every guest himself. He used to say, "The ones who look like they have the least are often carrying the most." He'd believed that, until his board reminded him that in business, values were negotiable. His throat tightened. Behind him, voices laughed. A burst of conversation. Something about who let the guy from the bus stop in here. Kazuo didn't turn. He simply stepped aside again. He was so very tired. He looked down at the stone floor, its patterns soft beneath the light. He could see his reflection there, blurred and faint. A man the world had stopped seeing, or maybe never saw to begin with. Next, the manager called again. Kazuo stepped forward. Name the man asked without looking up. S. Nakamura. Clicking keys, frown. A pause. I don't see anything under that name. Are you sure you booked? Yes? 3 weeks ago. Do you have a confirmation number? Kazuo reached into his coat. His phone battery was low. He opened his email app, but his fingers were trembling. The reservation. Maybe Yuki had used a different name. He should have asked before leaving. Maybe different name. My assistant booked it. The manager was already shaking his head. If you don't have a confirmation number, I can't help you right now. Please step aside so we can assist the next guest. Kazuo's voice dropped. Please. The manager raised his eyes, but not his voice. Sir, if you're not ready, I need to move on. And that was when he heard it. Sumimasen. The word was quiet, perfectly pronounced. And for the first time all day, Kazuo froze, not in frustration but in disbelief. He turned. A young woman in a black cafe apron stood a few feet away, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her face open and calm. She bowed gently. Then, in soft Japanese, "May I help you?" For a moment the lobby was silent. No keys clicked, no laughter rang, just the sound of snow outside and a single sentence that landed like a hand on his shoulder. Kazuo stared at her. Her voice, her words. He hadn't heard his native language spoken with that tone, not in years. Not here. She smiled. "I used to live in Osaka," she said in English. "I thought maybe you could use some help. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way." Kazuo followed the young woman's voice like a lifeline. Her tone was respectful, gentle, familiar. It wasn't just the words, it was how she said them. Like someone speaking home into existence. The front desk manager's expression faltered for a second. "Miss Monroe," he said, raising his eyebrows. "This is a check-in matter, not cafe business." The woman didn't flinch. She turned to Kazuo and switched back to Japanese, her voice steady. "Do you remember the name your assistant might have used when booking the room?" Kazuo hesitated. "Yuki Sasaki. She arranged everything. Maybe she used her name or S. Nakamura." His fingers hovered over his phone again, lost in too many emails and too little sleep. The woman turned to the desk. "Trevor, may I take a quick look?" Trevor let out a breath. "Claire, come on. You've got a shift to finish. Let us handle this." "It'll take 30 seconds, she said quietly. "Please." Trevor stared at her, then stepped aside with a stiff smile for the guests behind Kazuo. Claire moved behind the counter, her hands moving quickly over the keyboard. She didn't fumble. Didn't hesitate. Just typed searched, paused, and then smiled. Found it, she said, and looked at Kazuo. Suite reserved under S. Nakamura. 2-week stay. Check-in today. Kazuo blinked. It's there. She nodded. Yes, sir. The penthouse. The room fell still again, but this time it wasn't Kazuo who was speechless. Trevor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Wait. The penthouse? Claire stepped back around the counter and gestured gently toward the elevator. If you'd like, I can show you to your room. Kazuo looked from her to the staff around them. No one moved. The laughter in the lobby had quieted. People were watching now, but Claire didn't seem to care. She just waited as if giving him the choice back. The dignity. He gave her a soft nod. Claire took his suitcase carefully, respectfully, and walked beside him toward the elevator. Not a single bellhop offered to step in. Not one. Inside the elevator, silence returned. Kazuo stood beside her, studying her reflection in the doors. Young, tired, but calm. Her presence didn't demand attention. It offered ease. I am grateful, he said quietly. You did not have to help me. Claire looked up. You seemed like you needed it. He paused, then added, most people pretend not to notice. She gave a small smile, then looked down at her shoes. My dad used to say, just because something isn't your problem doesn't mean you leave it for someone else. Kazuo absorbed that. The doors slid open. The penthouse was quiet, elegant. Vaulted ceilings, mountain views, soft lighting. A private fireplace crackled gently in the corner. Claire set his suitcase near the wall. I'll let you settle in, she said, brushing her hands together. I'm sorry for the trouble at the front desk. You spoke to me, Kazuo replied, looking directly at her. With respect, that is not trouble. Claire hesitated, then nodded and turned to leave. May I ask? Kazuo stopped her with his voice. How did you learn Japanese? Claire paused, her back still to him. I taught English in Osaka for a few years. Through a program. I lived in Hirokata City. I miss it sometimes. He stepped closer. You spoke very well. Not like a tourist. She turned then, and this time her smile reached her eyes. I wasn't a tourist. I was a guest. That's different. Kazuo said nothing, but something in his chest shifted. Claire slipped out quietly. Later that evening, she returned to the cafe downstairs, tying her apron as she passed Angela near the dish station. You took a while, Angela said softly, her hands moving in soapy water. Ran into something at the front desk. Angela looked at her knowingly. The older man in the gray coat, Claire nodded. Yeah. Angela lowered her voice. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that goes away after sleep. The other kind. Claire blinked. You saw that too. Angela smiled sadly. You learn to see what others don't when you've been unseen long enough. Claire didn't respond. Her chest was tight again, the way it got when something felt unfinished. The cafe was slow that night. Most guests were at the bar or in their rooms. Claire wiped tables, refilled sugar jars, took drink orders for the few who trickled in. But her mind kept circling back to the man upstairs. His voice, his hands. That moment when he realized someone had spoken to him, like a person, not a problem. She didn't know who he was, but she knew how he felt. The next afternoon, Kazuo appeared in the cafe just before the lunch rush. He wore the same coat, but his posture seemed straighter. He sat at a small corner table, quietly reading the breakfast menu. Claire noticed him immediately. She approached. Would you like tea? He looked up. Chamomile, if you have it. We do. She returned moments later, setting the tea down with care. The view's nice from here in the afternoon. Sun hits the snow just right. He nodded. You've worked here long, 2 years, since I came back from Japan. You left Japan. Why, Claire hesitated, then sat down across from him. Just for a moment. My mother got sick. I came home to help. Then I stayed. Kazuo studied her face. You miss it. I do, she admitted. Not because it was perfect, just peaceful. The people. The way they treat strangers. The way they listen. There was a pause between them, but not an empty one. Kazuo spoke softly. In my country, we say, the guest is God. Claire nodded. Here we sometimes say, the customer is always right, but it doesn't always mean the same thing. He looked down at his tea, then back up. Do you enjoy this work? She gave a thoughtful shrug. Sometimes. I like people, but I'd rather be helping them in ways that matter. Language-culture connection. Hospitality should mean more than good towels and perfect lighting. Kazuo smiled just slightly. You speak with purpose. That is rare. Claire stood again as a new customer walked in, offering a polite nod. Let me know if you need anything else. As she walked away, Kazuo watched her go, not with longing, but with recognition. She reminded him of something he'd nearly forgotten. Hope. Claire wiped her hands on a towel and stepped out from the cafe kitchen into the quiet warmth of the dining area. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall lodge windows, casting gold across the wooden floor. Only 2 tables were occupied, and one of them again was his. Kazuo sat in the corner just as he had the day before, a paperback novel open in front of him, but unread. He wasn't looking for attention, but somehow his presence filled the space. Claire approached slowly, holding a fresh pot of chamomile tea. You came back? She said softly. Kazuo looked up. You have good tea. And quiet. She smiled, refilling his cup. I'll take that as a compliment. He nodded once, then closed the book. Claire lingered just a second longer than usual. There was something in his eyes today, less guarded. Still quiet, but open. You read much? She asked. When I travel. Anything good? Kazuo hesitated. Not really, but sometimes it helps. Slow the mind. Claire pulled out the chair across from him just a little. Would it be too bold to ask what you're slowing it from? He studied her, then leaned back, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. When you build a thing, he said slowly, a company, a life, you think you will know when it's over, when it's time to leave. Claire listened. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind every word. I did not see it coming, he continued. The shift, the betrayal, it was efficient. Claire lowered her gaze. Someone close, Kazuo nodded. Family. My nephew. She winced slightly. I'm sorry. He took a sip of tea. He said I was old-fashioned, that the brand needed a new face, new thinking, younger leadership. Is that what he wanted? Claire asked gently, or what the board wanted? Both, he said. He smiled while saying it. That was the part I remember most. He smiled. The silence between them pulsed. Claire finally said, sometimes kindness costs people power, and not everyone's willing to pay that price. Kazuo didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window at the snow-covered pine trees. When did you become so wise? He asked quietly. Claire laughed softly, almost embarrassed. I'm not wise. I've just been around people who pretended to be. You learn things when you listen long enough. Their eyes met, and for a breath there was something shared there. A flicker of understanding between strangers who had each been quietly wounded in different ways. Before she could say more, a sharp voice broke the moment. Claire. She turned. Trevor Langford stood at the cafe threshold, Arms crossed, a polite smile stretched too tight across his face. "You're needed at the service station. Orders backed up." Claire stood quickly. "I was just checking on a guest." Trevor's smile didn't move. "And now I need you back where you're scheduled." Claire's lips parted, like she might argue. Then she nodded, once brushed her apron, and gave Kazuo a brief, apologetic look. "Excuse me." As she passed Trevor, he leaned in and muttered, "Just loud enough. You don't want to confuse roles around here." Claire didn't answer, but Kazuo heard it. Every word. He watched her walk briskly toward the kitchen. Trevor lingered a moment, pretending to check something on a tablet. Then left. Kazuo closed his book, untouched. That evening, he didn't return to the cafe. Instead, he sat by the window in his suite, watching snow fall in slow motion over the mountain ridges. His tea had gone cold. His thoughts had not. He opened his laptop and scrolled through emails he hadn't answered in days. The same faces, the same platitudes, invitations, updates, "We miss your leadership," and beneath them all the quiet scramble to reshape what he'd built without ever saying his name out loud. He closed the screen. Something in him wanted to pack his bag, leave before he cared, before the girl with the steady voice and sad eyes gave him another reason to remember what hope had once felt like. Instead, he sat still. The next morning, Claire found a small folded note in her locker. No name, just a single line in Japanese. "Yesterday, your words reminded me who I used to be. Thank you." She held the paper for a long time, then tucked it gently into the front pocket of her notebook. "Good morning," Angela said, coming in behind her. Claire turned, startled. "Oh." "Morning." Angela gave her a knowing smile. "The gentleman from the cafe?" "He leave?" Claire shook her head. "No, I don't think so." Angela nodded. "Then maybe today you ask him a real question." Claire frowned. Like what? Angela's eyes twinkled. Like why he chose to come here. Alone. Claire tilted her head. "You think there's more to it?" Angela shrugged. "There always is. People who come to places like this in winter in silence, they're not running from snow. They're running from something warmer that burned them." Claire exhaled a laugh. "You should write novels." Angela winked. "I just clean the rooms. The stories are already there." Later that afternoon, Kazuo returned to the cafe. Claire brought him tea without being asked. Then after a moment, she sat across from him. "Can I ask something?" she said. He looked up. "Why here?" she said. "Why this resort? Why Aspen in the middle of winter when the world is somewhere warmer?" Kazuo took a long breath. "Because I own it," he said. Claire blinked. "I'm sorry," he leaned back, his voice low. "Morita International owns Snowcap Ridge, and 63 others." She sat back, stunned. "I was," he said. "Now I am just a man, with too much time, and no one waiting at home." Claire was quiet. Then she whispered, "You were testing us." Kazuo nodded. "I wanted to see if the values I built this on still lived here, if my company still knew how to see people." Claire's eyes filled not with tears but understanding. "And what did you find?" Kazuo didn't answer right away. He just looked at her and said, "You. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way." The storm came in slow, thick with silence. Snow layered itself over Aspen like a secret being kept covering the pine trees and glass rooftops of Snowcap Ridge in soft white. Inside the cafe, the fireplace was lit earlier than usual, casting a gold glow across the floor as wind pressed against the windows with quiet insistence. Claire stood behind the counter pouring steamed milk into a ceramic mug with a swirl of cinnamon on top. Her hands moved by habit, but her thoughts were nowhere near the espresso machine. She kept glancing toward the back corner of the cafe where Kazuo had taken his usual seat. Again. For the 4th day in a row. He hadn't said much that morning. Just a nod. A polite thank you. But there was something in his eyes, something quieter than usual. More distant. She set the mug down for another guest, then walked over to him, clearing her throat softly. Kazuo looked up and smiled faintly. Yes, please. She turned to go, but stopped herself. You don't usually come here this early. He paused, then said I couldn't sleep. Claire looked at him for a moment, unsure if she should ask why, but he didn't look away. So she sat. Bad dream, she offered gently. Not a dream, he said, just memory. She waited. Today, he said, eyes focused on the steam rising from his empty cup, is my wife's birthday. Claire's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, then back up. I didn't know you were married. I was. He looked toward the window. She passed. 8 years ago. I'm sorry, Claire whispered. Kazuo nodded once, slowly. She used to make tea like yours. Always chamomile. Said it quieted her thoughts. A quiet stretched between them, fragile but real. Claire reached over and gently placed her hand over his just for a second. He didn't pull away. The sound of the cafe door opening broke the stillness. A gust of cold air swept through as Marissa Cheney, the general manager, walked in with a clipboard in one hand and a frown in the other. Her heels tapped sharply against the hardwood, each step precise and rehearsed. Claire sat up straighter. Claire, Marissa called, pretending not to notice Kazuo. Can I see you in the office? Claire stood. Of course. She glanced at Kazuo, then followed Marissa into the back hallway. Inside the office, the mood changed immediately. The door clicked shut behind them. Marissa didn't look up. She shuffled a few papers and finally said, I've been reviewing our service logs. It seems you've been spending a lot of time with one particular guest. Claire's eyes narrowed. You mean Mr. Nakamura? Marissa folded her hands. The man who checked in under a different name, yes. Claire felt a slow heat rise in her chest. He wasn't being helped by anyone else. I stepped in. And now you're sitting with him at tables, leaving notes, abandoning your position. Claire blinked. I left him a thank you note, and I haven't missed a single shift. Marissa leaned back. Claire, you're a waitress. This isn't the Four Seasons. We don't do personalized hospitality for cafe staff. Claire's voice tightened. I was just being kind. Marissa raised a brow. Kindness isn't in the job description. Efficiency is. Claire swallowed the words she wanted to say. She felt it, that line between speaking up and staying silent. And she knew exactly how thin it was. You're not in trouble, Marissa added. But I would suggest keeping things professional. Understood? Claire nodded, her jaw clenched. Understood. When she returned to the cafe floor, Kazuo was still there watching the snowfall. You were gone a while, he said softly. Claire didn't smile this time. Manager talk. Kazuo didn't ask more. He didn't need to. She brought him his tea and sat again, her silence this time heavier. Kazuo looked at her carefully. You don't like her. Claire forced a breath. She doesn't like surprises, or people who don't fit the aesthetic. He gave her a gentle look. And what are you? Claire shook her head. Someone who's trying too hard to be useful in a place that wants her to be quiet. Kazuo sipped his tea. Then you must keep speaking. Claire gave him a small, tired smile. Later that evening, as the cafe closed down, Claire wiped down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. Angela came in from the back, coat already on scarf wrapped around her neck. You staying late again? She asked. Claire nodded. Just finishing up. Angela paused, then said, He's not just any guest, is he? Claire froze her hand, still. Angela continued, not by name. By feeling. Claire turned. What do you mean? Angela shrugged. Sometimes people walk into your life, and it feels like a mirror you didn't know you needed. Claire's eyes welled before she could stop them. She looked away, embarrassed. Angela stepped closer and touched her arm. You okay? Claire wiped quickly at her eyes. Yeah, just been a long day. Angela squeezed her arm gently. Be careful, Carino. Not all mirrors show kindness. Some just show the truth. Claire nodded. Thank you. When she left the cafe, the snow was falling heavier now. The wind was colder. But somehow she didn't feel small walking through it. Not tonight. As she passed the lobby on her way out, she paused. Kazuo stood by the grand piano alone, a single hand resting on its edge. No music played, just the hush of snowfall outside, and the quiet weight of everything unsaid between them. Claire walked over. He turned slowly as if expecting her. I didn't know you played, she said. I don't. Not anymore. She stepped closer. But you did. He nodded. Claire looked at the keys untouched, then back at him. Play something. Kazuo looked at her, and for a moment he was about to say no, but something in her eyes, unafraid, unassuming, held him there. He sat. His hands hovered for a moment. Then slowly he pressed down. The melody that emerged was fragile, a little uneven, like memory itself. But it filled the room. Claire stood beside him, listening with her whole body. When he finished, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, Claire whispered, You're not invisible, you know? Kazuo looked up at her. I see you, she said. And for the first time in many years, he believed it. The sky above Aspen was a deep winter blue, the kind of color that felt like silence just before the evening turned dark. Lights flickered on inside Snowcap Ridge, glowing like lanterns against the glass-paneled lobby. Guests drifted in from the slopes, shaking snow from their collars and laughing in the way only people on vacation can. But Claire didn't notice them tonight. Not really. She stood outside the staff entrance, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, her breath fogging the air in short, nervous bursts. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but something about leaving felt unfinished, like a door left cracked open, like a question still hanging in the air. Kazuo. She hadn't meant to sit with him by the piano, hadn't meant to stay that long, but when he played soft and hesitant and heartbreakingly human, she'd forgotten the time. She'd forgotten the rules. She'd just listened. And now she couldn't stop hearing it. Inside, she slipped through the back hallway and down toward the guest elevators. Her badge wasn't meant for this floor, but she moved with purpose, confident enough to avoid questions. She reached the penthouse level and paused outside the suite, then knocked once. A moment passed. Then the door opened. Kazuo looked surprised, but not displeased. Miss Monroe? Claire, she said, offering a small smile. He stepped aside without a word. The suite was softly lit, classical music playing low from a wireless speaker. A tea tray sat untouched on the table, a fire flickering in the stone hearth. Outside the tall windows, snow was falling again, slow, heavy flakes that made the whole world feel slower. I wasn't sure if I should come, Claire said. But I wanted to ask you something. Kazuo gestured for her to sit. Of course. She lowered herself into the chair across from him, nervous energy tightening her hands in her lap. You said yesterday that you used to be a man with purpose, she began. That you built something. That you were someone. Kazuo tilted his head slightly, listening. But when I look at you, she continued. I don't see someone who used to be anything. I see someone who still is. He didn't respond. Claire leaned forward. So why are you hiding? Kazuo looked into the fire. His voice came slower this time, like every word needed to pass through memory before it could reach his lips. When you lose control of the story you've written, when someone else turns the page before you're done reading it, you stop trusting the ink. Claire let that sit for a moment, then said, But you're still holding the pen. Kazuo smiled faintly. I think so, she said. You came here for a reason. Kazuo reached beside his chair and lifted a small leather notebook aged and worn at the edges. He opened it and handed it to her. Inside were names, notes, observations, dates, all handwritten in neat, deliberate strokes. At the top of one page, Snowcap Ridge, staff interactions. Claire stared at it. You were watching. He nodded. Not spying. Observing. Quietly. Seeing what mattered when no one was looking. And she asked. He met her eyes. Some failed, but some surprised me. Claire looked down at the book again, then handed it back her chest, tightening. I don't know why that makes me feel nervous, she admitted. Because it means you were seen, Kazuo said gently. And most people don't realize how rarely that happens. There was a pause. Not awkward, just full. Then Claire said, When I left Japan, I told myself I'd return. I'd study language formally, maybe work in international hospitality or translation, but life got complicated. Kazuo listened without interrupting. My mom's health declined. Bills piled up. And I didn't want to be the girl chasing dreams while my family struggled. Kazuo leaned forward. Duty. It's a language I understand. She smiled. Sometimes I wonder if I gave up too soon. You didn't give up, he said. You adapted. There's honor in that. Claire looked down at her hands. But I miss it. The sense of meaning, of growing. Lately I feel like I'm just passing time. Kazuo's voice softened. Time is never just passed when you give it to someone else. Claire looked up, and the silence between them felt like warmth, not distance. Then suddenly the doorbell rang. Claire straightened. Kazuo stood and opened it. Trevor Langford stood there perfectly poised. Mr. Nakamura, he said, flashing a polished smile. Apologies for the late hour, but I wanted to personally extend my appreciation for your stay and make sure everything has been to your satisfaction. Kazuo's demeanor didn't change. Everything has been enlightening. Trevor laughed a little clearly, trying to read the mood. Then his eyes landed on Claire. Oh, he said I didn't realize we had company? Claire stood. I was just leaving. Kazuo glanced at her. Thank you for the tea recommendation. Claire smiled. You're welcome. She moved past Trevor, who stepped aside, but said quietly, You might want to be careful about crossing departmental lines, Claire. Just a friendly reminder. She didn't respond. Just kept walking. Inside the suite, Kazuo returned to the fire. Trevor stepped in further. I hope we're exceeding expectations, he said. And if there's anything special you'd like during your stay, I'd be more than happy to coordinate. Kazuo looked at him, his face unreadable, then simply said, Who hired you? Trevor blinked. Pardon, the position you're in. Who gave it to you? Regional director, sir. And do you think she would be proud of how you treat guests who don't look like they belong? Trevor's smile faltered. I wasn't aware I'd treated anyone poorly. Kazuo looked away. That's the problem. Trevor cleared his throat. Well, if you need anything, just let us know. Kazuo didn't reply. He stared into the fire until the door clicked shut again. That night, Claire lay awake in her small studio apartment, the note still in her coat pocket. And across town, Kazuo sat alone by the window of the penthouse, the words she'd said echoing softly in his mind. "You're still holding the pen." The wind had shifted by morning. Snow still fell in steady flakes across Aspen, but it was quieter now, almost hushed, as if the sky itself were waiting. Inside Snowcap Ridge, staff moved with holiday week urgency. Guests in velvet coats checked out, others in sleek ski gear checked in. The concierge counter buzzed, but the air felt heavier than usual. Claire walked through the lobby with a fresh tray of pastries for the cafe. Her eyes swept the room instinctively. No Kazuo. She hadn't seen him all morning. It was unlike him to vanish, especially now. When she returned to the cafe, Angela was stacking ceramic mugs behind the bar. "He hasn't been down yet," Angela said without turning. Claire blinked. "You knew I was going to ask." Angela shrugged. "You always look around before you start the shift. Unless he's here. Then you forget where you are for 10 minutes. Claire flushed. "It's not like that." Angela turned soft smile in place. "I didn't say it was bad." Claire sighed and set the tray down. He's not a guest, not to me." Angela nodded. "I know." Claire hesitated. "Do you think I've crossed a line?" Angela paused. "No, I think you finally saw someone worth knowing. Most people don't take that risk." Claire looked down. "But he's someone. Important. And you're not." The question lingered long after Claire returned to wiping down the cafe tables. Later that afternoon, she found a folded slip of paper tucked under the espresso machine. Her name was written on the front in crisp, elegant handwriting. "Claire, I will be leaving tomorrow. Before I go, I would be honored if you would join me for tea in the atrium at 5 p.m. Kazuo." Her stomach dropped. Leaving, she reread it twice, then tucked it quickly into her pocket, as if hiding it would stop the clock from ticking. The atrium at Snowcap Ridge wasn't used often. It was enclosed in glass facing the east slope with warm lantern light and a wall of climbing ivy that stayed green even in winter. It felt like a secret, like something meant to be discovered slowly. At 5 on the dot, Claire arrived. Kazuo was already seated at a small table between them, a traditional tea set placed with quiet care. He stood when he saw her, bowing slightly. "You came?" he said. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied, heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. He poured for her first. The scent of jasmine rose in the cold air between them. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning," he said, voice gentle. She nodded, unsure what to say. "But before I go," he continued, "I wanted to tell you something. That has nothing to do with the company, or my name, or titles." Claire looked up. "What is it?" Kazuo studied her face for a long time. "Then, you reminded me that I'm not finished." Claire's breath caught. "I came here to vanish," he said, "to bury the last pieces of something that felt broken. But you saw through all of that. And not because you were curious, because you cared." Claire blinked against the heat in her eyes. "I didn't mean to change anything. You didn't try," he said. "That's why it mattered." The quiet pressed in around them. Claire finally asked, "So why leave?" Kazuo hesitated. "Because I have decisions to make, ones I don't want clouded by emotion." Claire lowered her gaze. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do," he said, voice firmer now. "You made me want to fight for what I built, for what still matters, and I can't do that halfway." She swallowed hard. "And after you've decided," Kazuo looked at her eyes, warm but unreadable, "then I'll know if I'm returning to a company, or to something more." Claire felt her hands curl in her lap. "You talk like this is all temporary." "Everything is," he said gently. But that doesn't make it meaningless. For a moment she wanted to reach for him, to ask him not to go, but she couldn't find the words that wouldn't sound like a plea. Instead she asked, "Do you regret coming here?" Kazuo shook his head slowly. "No. It was the beginning of something I didn't expect." She looked at him, feeling every inch of the distance between their chairs. He set his teacup down. "I wanted to give you something before I go." She blinked. "You've already given me too much." "This isn't a gift," he said. "It's an invitation." He pulled a small envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. Claire stared at it, but didn't reach for it. "What is it?" "An offer," Kazuo said. "Not because I owe you, but because I believe in you." Claire felt her throat tighten. "There's a program we run in Tokyo. For cultural liaisons, people who help bridge language heritage service. It's what you talked about, what you dreamed of." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Kazuo." He held up a hand. "Read it later. Decide when you're ready. I'll leave the door open." She reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over his. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. He looked at her, no hesitation in his answer. "Because you saw me," he said, when no one else did. The sun dipped lower. Light faded from the glass walls of the atrium, casting long shadows around them. The snow outside had begun, again gentle and unhurried. Claire didn't say goodbye when she stood, and Kazuo didn't ask her to. When she reached the lobby, envelope in hand, the world outside looked different somehow. Not because it had changed, but because she had. Claire didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat unopened on her nightstand, as if touching it would change everything. She'd thought about tearing it open, about reading it by the soft glow of her bedside lamp. But something told her the words inside needed a kind of quiet she hadn't reached yet. So she waited. And the silence in her apartment stretched into the kind of stillness that asks questions you're not ready to answer. By morning, the town had been dusted again in snow. White rooftops, silent sidewalks, branches frozen in time. Claire took the long way to work, her boots crunching softly on the path that cut through the pine trees behind the resort. Her fingers were cold. Her breath fogged the air in front of her. But the walk helped. It cleared just enough space in her mind to make room for truth. Kazuo was leaving. And something about that fact felt heavier than it should have. Like a closing door. Like a train pulling away without knowing if it would ever come back. Inside the cafe, Angela was already rolling silverware. She looked up as Claire entered, then tilted her head. "You didn't sleep," she said. Claire hung up her coat and exhaled. "Was it that obvious?" Angela smiled. "You look like someone who got handed something they didn't expect." Claire didn't answer right away. Then she walked behind the counter, pulled out the envelope from her bag, and placed it on the prep station between them. Angela raised an eyebrow. "You finally opened it?" Claire shook her head. "No. I keep waiting for the right moment." Angela tapped a spoon gently against the countertop. "There is no right moment. Just the one where you're brave enough to stop waiting." Claire stared at the envelope for a beat longer, then tucked it away again. Before she could say anything else, a voice called out from the entrance. "Claire." She turned. Trevor stood near the cafe's threshold, looking polished and controlled, but with that familiar tightness around his eyes. The kind that warned of something dressed up as professional, but meant to sting. "Can I have a word?" he asked. Claire nodded, following him just outside the cafe to the edge of the hallway. The warmth of the cafe slipped away, instantly replaced by the cooler, more clinical hum of the resort's back corridors. Trevor crossed his arms. "You've been spending a lot of time with one of our guests." Her posture stiffened. "If you're referring to Mr. Nakamura, I'm referring to any guest," he interrupted. "But yes, particularly him." Claire's voice was careful now. "I was just being respectful, like we're trained to be." Trevor gave a humorless laugh. "Respectful is offering extra cream, not sitting down, not disappearing for nearly an hour yesterday while other guests waited." Claire bristled. "It was my break, and I didn't neglect anyone." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm going to be honest with you, Claire. People like him, they come and go. But the rest of us, we stay here. We have jobs, we have reputations to protect." She blinked. "Are you threatening me?" "No," he said, smiling just enough to make it worse. "I'm advising you to remember where your place is, before you let someone talk you into thinking you've outgrown it." Claire's chest rose with a slow breath. Then she said very clearly, "I know exactly where my place is." Trevor's expression flickered for half a second, and then he turned and walked away. Back in the cafe, Angela was watching. Claire didn't need to say anything. "I'll cover for you," Angela said softly. "Go breathe." Claire nodded and slipped outside through the side door. She ended up near the back terrace of the resort, facing the ridge line. The view was endless. Trees, mountains, sky. She sat on a bench dusted lightly with snow and finally pulled out the envelope. She opened it. Inside was a simple letter typed on thick cream paper with a subtle watermark. "Claire. Your words reminded me of a time when I built things not for profit, but for purpose. When I believed hospitality meant more than service, it meant dignity, culture, connection. I am offering you a position at our Tokyo office in the Cultural Experience Program. Full tuition for language study, housing support, a mentor. The rest you will build on your own. If you accept, you'll begin your training within the next 60 days. If you decline, nothing between us changes. Either way, I leave tomorrow, knowing I met someone worth believing in again. With respect, Kazuo Nakamura." Claire read it twice, and then again. The paper trembled in her hands. Behind her, the wind shifted. She heard snow falling from a nearby tree as a branch gave way under its weight. She looked up toward the sky, not searching for anything, just trying to make room for the feeling rising in her chest. She wanted to say yes. Every part of her did. But the truth, the one that sat quietly in the corners of her mind, was heavier than excitement. It was her mother. It was the bills stacked on her kitchen counter. It was the fear of failing in front of people who believed in her. And yet, she stood and walked back into the resort with the envelope clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't go back to the cafe. She went to the elevators. Up, toward the top floor. Her heart beat faster with each floor. When the doors opened, she stepped out into the quiet hall and stood in front of his suite. She knocked. It took a moment before Kazuo opened the door. He looked at her with soft surprise, then stepped aside without a word. Claire walked in and turned to face him. "I read it," she said, holding up the letter. He waited. "I want to say yes. Everything in me wants to say yes. But I can't." Kazuo looked at her, and his expression didn't change. "I have responsibilities here. My mom's care. I've got reality." "I understand," he said quietly. Claire's voice shook. "But I needed to tell you in person, because you saw something in me I stopped seeing in myself, and I'll never forget that." Kazuo nodded once. "And I'll never forget what you gave back to me." She blinked. "What was that?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "Belief." There was a long pause between them, and then Kazuo said more gently, "You don't have to say yes today. Just don't say no because you're afraid." Claire felt her throat tighten, but she nodded. "I won't." And in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by everything unsaid, something shifted between them. Not an ending, but the beginning of something neither of them knew how to name yet. Kazuo's sweet door clicked shut behind Claire, but the words he'd spoken still echoed in her chest, like a soft drum beat. "Don't say no, because you're afraid." She took the elevator down in silence, hands clenched around the letter mind, spinning faster than her breath could keep up with. When the doors opened, she walked out into the lobby and straight into the scent of citrus and pine that always floated near the fireplace. The warmth should have calmed her, but her thoughts didn't slow. What she hadn't said, what she couldn't say, was that fear wasn't the only thing stopping her. It was guilt, responsibility, the weight of home, of routines, of everything she'd convinced herself she owed to others. It wasn't just her life that would shift if she said yes. It was everything around her. She was halfway across the lobby when Marissa intercepted her. "There you are," the general manager said smoothly. "I've been looking for you." Claire straightened. "Is something wrong?" Marissa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Trevor mentioned a long conversation you had with one of our penthouse guests yesterday." Claire nodded slowly. "Mr. Nakamura invited me for tea." Marissa's smile tightened. "I see. And what exactly did you two discuss?" Claire blinked. "I'm not sure that's relevant. It is when a member of my staff is creating confusion about her role," Marissa replied, lowering her voice just enough. "This isn't a personal retreat. You're here to do a job. If guests begin to believe they can personally sponsor cafe workers or make offers, it disrupts the professionalism of this establishment." Claire's heart thudded. "With all due respect, I haven't broken any rules. I've treated Mr. Nakamura with respect the same way I'd treat anyone." Marissa leaned in slightly. "But not everyone gets handwritten notes, do they?" Claire's eyes flickered. "So, you've been going through my things." Marissa didn't flinch. "I know what kind of attention can be distracting at your age. I'm here to remind you what's at stake. This job, Claire, is stability, a path. Don't throw it away on some emotional fantasy." Claire swallowed. "You don't even know him." Marissa straightened. "I don't need to." That was the last word spoken before Marissa turned and walked away, heels clicking against the tile like punctuation marks Claire didn't ask for. She stood there for a long time, rooted to the floor, her thoughts caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. That night, Claire stayed after closing. Angela was already gone. The cafe lights dimmed except for one lamp over the register. Claire sat in the back booth with her head down, staring at the envelope Kazuo had given her, as if it were a mirror she wasn't ready to look into. She didn't hear the door open. "You're still here." She looked up. It was Jordan, the young bellhop. He stood awkwardly near the entrance jacket, half-zipped his hair, still damp from the snow outside. Claire tried to smile. "Just thinking." He walked in slowly, tugging off his gloves. "You know I saw him, too." Claire tilted her head. Kazuo Jordan nodded. "The day he arrived. Everyone walked past him, but he waited, like he was testing us." She didn't speak. "I didn't help him either," Jordan said quietly. "I didn't even say hello. And then when I found out who he was, I've been thinking about that ever since." Claire sat back. "You weren't the only one. But you were the one who did something," Jordan said. "You saw him. You treated him like he mattered before you knew he was someone." Claire felt her throat tighten. It didn't feel brave at the time. Just human. "That's what makes it brave," he said. They were quiet for a moment. Then Jordan asked, "Is he really leaving?" Claire nodded. "Tomorrow?" He looked down. "Think he'll come back? I don't know." Jordan lingered as if he wanted to say something more. Then he offered a small wave and left the cafe, the door swinging gently behind him. The next morning, Claire arrived early. The snow had stopped sometime in the night. The resort glowed under a thin layer of ice, the trees like glass sculptures, the mountains painted in soft pastels by the rising sun. Inside the lobby, guests gathered for checkout. Suitcases rolled across the tile valets called names. Children tugged at sleeves and pointed towards the fireplace. Claire slipped behind the front desk and found the reservation list. She shouldn't have, but she needed to know. Kazuo's car was scheduled for 10:15 a.m. She glanced at the clock. 9:48. Without thinking, she hurried down the hall and stepped into the elevator. Her reflection looked back at her in the mirrored doors, flushed, nervous, determined. When she reached the top floor, she moved quickly. No plan. Just instinct. She knocked. After a pause, the door opened. Kazuo stood there dressed in a dark wool coat scarf already wrapped. His suitcase sat by the door. But his face softened when he saw her. "I didn't want to let you go without saying something," Claire said, breath-catching. He waited. She stepped inside, slowly. "I was scared, not just of leaving, of changing, of becoming someone new, but I realized, maybe I already did, and maybe I'm just the last person to notice." Kazuo said nothing, letting her speak. "I still don't know what's going to happen, but I know I want to be the kind of person who says yes to things that matter." Her voice trembled. "So if the offer's still open?" "It is," he said quietly. Claire smiled through the tears starting to blur her vision. "Then my answer is yes." Kazuo took a slow breath, and something shifted in his expression, like relief and gratitude, and something quieter, something tender. "I will see you in Tokyo," he said. Claire looked at him, trying to memorize the moment, the soft morning light on his face, the way his eyes held hers, like she was more than a passing kindness. "You better," she said, voice breaking just a little, "because I've got a lot more questions." He chuckled softly, then lifted his suitcase. As he stepped into the hallway, Claire stood in the doorway watching him go. He turned once at the elevator and bowed his head. "Not goodbye. Just see you soon." The doors closed, and Claire, heart pounding, leaned against the frame. For the first time in years, she felt like her life wasn't something happening to her. It was something she was choosing. Claire sat at the corner table in the cafe long after her shift had ended, a mug of cold chamomile tea in her hands. The light outside had softened into that dusty blue that always came just before evening in Aspen. She watched the snow settle onto the windowsill like it knew she needed quiet. Kazuo was gone. Gone, but not distant. His presence still lingered in the empty seat across from her, in the notebook tucked in her bag, and in the choice she had finally made. Yes, she had said yes. But the reality of that decision was beginning to take shape in ways that made her stomach flutter, equal parts nerves and anticipation. The application packet had arrived that morning, forwarded from Tokyo with startling efficiency. She hadn't opened it yet. It sat in her locker like something alive waiting. Angela slid into the seat across from her, pulling off her gloves. "Okay, spill it." Claire looked up, startled. "What?" Angela raised an eyebrow. "Don't play dumb. You've been floating around here like a balloon tied to someone else's wrist." "I know that look." Claire gave a quiet laugh. "It's real. Everything he said. The offer. It's all real." Angela leaned in. "So what's the next move?" Claire traced the rim of her mug. "I need to figure out how to tell my mom." Angela's smile faded just a little. She's going to be proud of you. Claire nodded slowly. She's also going to be scared. I've been her constant since Dad left. And this feels like shaking everything. Angela softened. Sometimes the best things come after the shake. Claire looked out the window. I just wish I could bring her with me. But she's still doing outpatient rehab, and her insurance barely covers it. I can't just vanish across the world without knowing she's okay. Angela was quiet for a moment, then said, You won't vanish. You'll evolve. She'll see that. Claire didn't respond. But the doubt in her eyes said everything. The next morning, Claire called out of work. Not because she was sick, but because she needed air. Real air. The kind you could only get by driving 20 miles into the trees, where the roads wound too much for phone service, and the quiet pressed against your skin like a blanket. She took her mom to breakfast, just the two of them. A small diner just outside town, the kind with red booths and coffee that tasted like memory. Her mother June wore her hair pulled back in a clip, her scarf tucked neatly into her coat. She looked stronger lately, her face more open. Claire stirred her creamer into her cup with slow, deliberate circles. I got offered something, she said quietly. June looked up. Fork paused mid-air. Offered Claire nodded. A position. In Tokyo. Full training. Housing. Everything I said I wanted 5 years ago. June blinked. Tokyo. Claire braced. It's with a program that focuses on culture and language. I'd be learning and working. A real path. A future. June set her fork down and leaned back. So this is why you've been distracted. I wasn't hiding it, Claire said quickly. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud until it felt real. Her mother's eyes flicked to the window. Then back to her. Do you want to go? Yes, Claire said without hesitation. I do. The silence between them stretched. Then June reached across the table and took Claire's hand. Then go. Claire blinked. Just like that, June's voice cracked a little. You gave up a lot when I got sick. You think I don't remember the applications you never sent, the interviews you skipped? I do. Claire's throat tightened. You needed me. I still do, June said. But not like before. And honestly, honey, if you stay for me, I'll never forgive myself. Claire pressed her lips together. I just want you to be okay. I will be, June whispered, especially knowing you're out there doing what you were made to do. Claire's shoulders dropped relief, washing through her like warmth in the cold. Later that night, she sat at her kitchen table, application spread out before her, and filled it out in one sitting. No breaks, no hesitation, just ink, paper, and resolve. The next few days passed in a blur. Farewells at the cafe came slowly, first to the regulars, then to the staff. Jordan was the first to hug her whispering Tokyos, lucky with a grin. Angela cried. Loudly. Even Marissa stopped her in the hallway one afternoon. You surprised me, Claire, she said flatly, then added, but that's not always a bad thing. Claire smiled politely and walked away. But one person still hadn't called, or written, or reached out. Kazuo. She hadn't expected a daily message. He wasn't that kind of man. But she had expected something. It had been 10 days. Then, on a snowy Tuesday evening, her phone lit up with a new email. No subject line, just a name in the sender field, K. Nakamura. Claire opened it instantly. Claire. There are moments I still replay. The piano. Your voice. That final yes. I've been quiet because I wanted to give you space to choose this on your own, but I haven't stopped thinking about you. I hope Tokyo is the first step, not the last. Let me know when you arrive. I'll be waiting. K. She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back Kazuo. I leave in 5 days. Tell me where to meet you. Claire. She hit send. Outside her window, snow began to fall again. Quiet, steady, beautiful in the way all beginnings are. Claire stood at Gate 12 of Denver International Airport, her fingers curled tight around the handle of her carry-on. Around her, the soft murmur of early morning travelers ebbed and flowed coffee orders gate announcements, the occasional laugh echoing across the high ceilings. But inside her chest, everything was still. Focused. 5 days had turned into 5 blinks. Between final packing, helping her mother settle into her new physical therapy routine, and tying up loose ends at Snowcap Ridge time, had moved like it was sprinting away from her. She'd barely slept the night before. Kazuo hadn't written again. Not after her reply. No, see you soon. No instructions, no place. Just silence. But she boarded the plane anyway. Tokyo wasn't just about Kazuo anymore. It was about her choice, her future. Still, as the jet began to roll down the runway and her heart thundered in sync with the engines, she wondered if maybe she had imagined the connection they shared. If maybe that quiet intimacy had only existed inside the bubble of Aspen. She didn't know if she would see him again, and that uncertainty scared her more than the move itself. 12 hours later, the plane touched down. Tokyo unfolded beneath her like a waking dream, neon lights glowing softly against the dusky skyline, distant trains, humming city streets stretching in every direction. Claire followed the signs through immigration and baggage claim, the crisp Japanese announcements echoing faintly behind her. She moved like muscle memory, her Japanese rusty but determined, nodding politely, bowing slightly when appropriate. As she stepped into the arrivals hall, she froze. There were dozens of people waiting. Families, drivers, tourists holding signs. And then there he was. Kazuo. Not in a suit this time. He wore a dark overcoat and scarf, his hair a little windswept, his posture calm as ever. But his eyes lit up the moment he saw her. Claire exhaled, stunned, motionless for a beat. Then she moved. They met halfway. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there blinking back the emotion that rose too fast to contain. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," she said quietly. Kazuo smiled. "I told you I would be waiting. I thought you meant metaphorically." "I meant both." Claire shook her head with a breathy laugh. "You could have said something." "I didn't want you to come for me," he said. "I needed to know you were coming for you." She looked at him for a long moment. "I did." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." He took her suitcase without asking and led her toward the escalators. Outside, the air was cold and fresh, the city lights casting a soft glow on the pavement. A black car waited at the curb, engine running, driver standing by. Kazuo opened the door for her. "I booked a small hotel for your first few nights until your program housing is ready. Quiet, traditional. I thought you'd prefer that." Claire slid into the seat, touched by the care in his voice. "Thank you." When he joined her, they sat in a comfortable silence as the car pulled away from the airport. Tokyo blurred past the window glass buildings, lantern-lit alleyways, quiet storefronts with handwritten signs. Claire leaned her head against the glass, absorbing it all. After a few minutes, Kazuo broke the silence. "I know your life is going to get very busy now," he said. "Training, orientation, language lessons. But when you're ready, I'd like to show you something." Claire turned to him. "What is it?" He hesitated, then said, "Something I used to care about, that I stopped believing in for a long time." She waited. "A project. One I started years ago," he said. "It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a cultural center built on values, not profits. But after everything with the company, I let it sit, empty, half-finished." Claire's voice softened. "You're thinking of finishing it? I'm thinking of reopening it," he said. "With someone who remembers why stories matter." Her breath caught. Kazuo turned to her. "Not right away. No pressure. I just wanted you to know it exists. And maybe in time it's something we could build together." Claire blinked, heart unspooling in her chest. "You're serious on many things, Claire," he said with a quiet smile. "But when I believe in something or someone, I don't say it lightly." She didn't respond right away. Just stared at him, the weight of his words anchoring her in a way she hadn't expected. Finally, she said, "I'd like that. When the time's right." Kazuo nodded. "Good." They arrived at the hotel, a small ryokan tucked behind a row of quiet buildings, warm light spilling through the shoji doors. The owner bowed deeply as they entered, already expecting her. The suite was simple, but beautiful. Tatami mats, low table, a kettle already whistling softly in the corner. A futon was neatly laid out near the window, where the city glimmered just beyond the trees. Kazuo placed her bag inside the door, then paused. "I'll give you time to rest," he said. "But if you want dinner tomorrow, there's a place I'd like to take you. No pressure, just a meal." Claire smiled. "What kind of place? A restaurant where no one knows my name?" he said. "Where we can just be two people learning each other's story." She felt a smile stretch across her face. "Then yes." He stepped back, bowing slightly. "Good night, Claire." She bowed in return. "Good night, Kazuo." When the door closed, she stood in the center of the room for a long time, listening to the distant sounds of the city. She moved to the window, opening it just enough to let in the cool air. A light breeze danced through the room, carrying with it the scent of cedar and something unfamiliar. Possibility. Claire breathed it in, and this time it didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. It felt like she was stepping fully into something new. The restaurant Kazuo had chosen wasn't on any map Claire could have found. It was tucked behind a stationery shop in a quiet neighborhood, down a narrow alley lined with faded Norin curtains. No neon lights, no sign, just a single red lantern swaying gently in the breeze. He met her outside, dressed simply, no coat, just a navy sweater and scarf. He looked younger, somehow, softer. When she approached his face, lit with a quiet joy that made something flutter in her chest. "You found it," he said. "You didn't make it easy," she replied, breathless from the walk. "That's part of the charm," Kazuo said, pulling the curtain aside for her to step in. Inside the space was intimate. 8 seats around a counter, a single chef working quietly behind it. The smell of grilled fish and yuzu drifted through the air, grounding her. They sat side by side. There were no menus. Just a nod from the chef, a pour of warm sake, and the slow unfolding of a meal built like a story. For the first few minutes, they didn't speak. Then Kazuo turned to her, his voice barely above the clink of ceramic. "I've been thinking about what you said. That night in Aspen?" Claire's pulse skipped. "Which part, that you were afraid of becoming someone new?" He paused, gaze steady. "But I think you already had. You just didn't know how to live as her yet." She looked at him, her fingers warming around the sake cup. "I still don't." "You don't have to yet," he said. "You just have to stop fighting her." Claire sat back slightly. "What about you?" "Who are you becoming?" Kazuo hesitated. "Someone who remembers why he started all this. My grandfather used to say that wealth was a tool. But legacy, that's the story people tell when you're not in the room." She turned toward him, curious. "And what's your story now?" He smiled faintly. "Still being written." "But you're in it." Her heart caught. He didn't say it for effect. He said it the way someone shares a memory quietly, truthfully, without expectation. Claire looked down. You know I still don't know why you chose me. Kazuo's brow furrowed. I didn't choose you, she blinked. You were already there, he said. I just finally saw clearly. The chef placed a dish in front of them, soft slices of yellowtail over warm rice. Claire picked up her chopsticks but didn't eat right away. Kazuo, she said, eyes fixed on the food. What happens if this doesn't work, us, I mean? He was quiet. Then gently. Then we'll have known something rare, something honest, and we'll carry it forward whether together or apart. Claire swallowed hard. Before she could respond, the chef brought out a final course simple miso soup steaming gently in the low light. It felt like closure. Kazuo paid, and they stepped back into the night. The city was quieter here. Snow flurries fell like dust in the light from the windows. They walked in silence for a while, their steps slow, unhurried. Then Kazuo stopped in front of a small bridge crossing a narrow canal. The water reflected the lights of the nearby apartments, soft and rippling. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Claire turned to him, suddenly aware of the weight in his voice. I didn't just come to Tokyo to pick up where I left off, he said. I came because I was asked to. She frowned. By who? The board, he replied. They want me to lead again. Publicly, not just from the shadows. Claire's breath caught. They offered me a way back, Kazuo said. But it comes with conditions, time, visibility, public commitment, and appearances. She stared at him. You mean, no relationships? He didn't answer. Claire looked away, her chest tightening. I don't want to lose what we're building, he said quietly. But I won't ask you to wait for something uncertain. A long silence stretched between them. Then Claire turned back, her voice steady but soft. What if we didn't call it waiting? What if we just called it walking side by side until we know which road we're on? Kazuo blinked, the hint of surprise in his eyes, giving way to something deeper. Something like hope. You'd do that? She nodded. I didn't come here for a fantasy. I came here to live fully. And if part of that means walking with you even without guarantees, then yes. He looked at her, like he wanted to memorize the moment. Then he took her hand, warm and certain in the cold air. They stood on the bridge. No more words needed. The future was still uncertain. But for now, they had this. And it was enough. Claire adjusted the strap of her tote bag as she stood outside the Cultural Exchange Center for her first official day. The building was modest stone and wood-clean lines, quiet gardens in front. But something about it radiated purpose, like every brick had been placed with care. Inside, she was greeted by a woman in her 60s named Mrs. Arakawa, who introduced herself with a warm bow and a kind smile. Claire immediately felt the grounding presence of someone who had spent years shaping minds with grace, not pressure. We're happy to have you, Claire, she said gently. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to learn. That sentence stayed with her all morning. Classes were immersive, layered in culture etiquette and language nuance. It wasn't just about grammar, it was about rhythm, respect, timing. Everything in Tokyo had a pulse, and Claire was just beginning to hear it. But even as she practiced her phrases and studied tea ceremony rituals, she felt a growing knot of uncertainty in her chest. Kazuo hadn't reached out again. It had been 6 days. She hadn't expected daily texts or long poetic messages. That wasn't his style. But she had expected something after that night on the bridge. Some small sign that he was still with her, even quietly. Claire told herself he was busy. That leadership talks came with endless meetings, press, and pressure. Still, each evening as she walked home through the softly lit streets, she caught herself looking toward passing cars. Hoping. By Friday, the weight had grown too heavy. After class, she returned to her ryokan and opened her laptop. His name was still in her inbox. She hovered over it, heart pounding. Finally, she clicked, compose. Kazuo, I hope things have gone well with the board. I imagine your week's been full. I just wanted to say I've started. The program, the language, the life, and it's hard, and good, and strange. And every part of it reminds me that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that afternoon in Aspen. I guess I just wanted to say, thank you. And also, she paused, backspaced, then typed, I miss talking to you, even if it's just about the small things. Claire. She stared at the message, then hit send before she could overthink it. The next morning there was no reply, nor the next. By Monday, Claire was tired of staring at her inbox, so she threw herself into her studies. She volunteered to help Mrs. Arakawa prepare materials for the center's seasonal storytelling event. She practiced her keigo until her tongue twisted. She even signed up to lead a short conversation circle for visiting tourists from the U.S. But on Wednesday, just after her morning class, something changed. Mrs. Arakawa approached her with a curious smile. There's someone waiting for you in the garden, she said. Claire blinked. Waiting for me, Mrs. Arakawa nodded. He said you'd understand. Claire's breath caught. She stepped into the courtyard slowly, her shoes crunching softly over the gravel path. And there he was. Kazuo stood near the koi pond, hands in his coat pockets, gazing at the water as if it held answers. When he turned and saw her, there was a flash of something in his eyes, relief maybe, or longing. Hi, Claire said, her voice just above a whisper. Hi. She walked closer, heart racing. I wasn't sure if I said too much, or not enough. Kazuo's jaw tightened slightly. You said exactly what I needed to hear. I just wasn't ready to answer. She waited, not pushing. He looked down at the pond, watching the fish ripple beneath the surface. The board offered me everything back. More power, more control, but it came with chains. A public life, a curated image, and a quiet expectation that I'd be alone. Claire swallowed. And I told them no, Kazuo said softly. Her breath hitched. What he turned to her. I walked away. But that was your legacy, she said. Your family's company. I thought it was, he said, until I realized the real legacy isn't in what I keep. It's in what I build next. Claire stared at him, emotions storming beneath her skin. I want to build something that makes room for truth, he said. Not just for me, for others. For stories like yours. For people like you. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. And what about us? Kazuo's eyes searched hers. I want that too. But I know it won't be easy. Your path, your studies, they matter. I don't want to distract you from that. You're not a distraction, she whispered. You're part of the reason I found the courage to begin. He took her hand gently, the contact grounding them. Then maybe we don't have to define it right now, he said. Maybe we just keep showing up. Like this. When it matters. Claire nodded, tears welling, despite her trying to hold them back. They stood in the quiet garden, the city humming around them, not needing to say more. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was honest. And that was more than enough. The days that followed unfolded in quiet rhythm like the turning of pages in a book. Both of them were finally ready to read. Kazuo didn't disappear this time. He didn't fill her days with grand gestures or empty promises either. He showed up in small, intentional ways. He waited outside her class one afternoon with 2 steamed buns and a thermos of green tea. No explanation. Just, you looked tired yesterday. He left a small notebook in her locker at the center filled with handwritten kanji practice sheets, and one note tucked in the back for when the words get heavy. And he listened. At night they'd walk, no agenda, no performance, just the two of them weaving through Tokyo's quieter streets. Claire narrating her culture shock moments and mispronunciations, Kazuo offering bits of his own childhood things he hadn't told anyone in years. But even as something warm and steady grew between them, Claire felt a pressure building beneath the surface. It started when she was asked to give a presentation, an open session for visiting students and local donors on cultural connection through language. Mrs. Arakawa called it an opportunity to lead. Claire heard it as an opportunity to fall flat on your face. "I'm not ready," she told Kazuo one evening, the city glowing behind her. "You are?" he replied without hesitation. She looked at him, searching for doubt in his expression. "It's not like I'll be sharing something I mastered. I'll be sharing something I'm still figuring out." He held her gaze. "That's what makes it honest." She sighed, pulling her scarf tighter. "What if they think I'm a joke?" Then they weren't listening. Claire wanted to believe him. She did. But old insecurities ran deep, and no amount of affirmation could drown them overnight. 2 nights before the presentation, she stayed late at the center to rehearse. The halls were quiet, the last of the staff filtering out. She stood in the small auditorium, lights dimmed, empty seats stretching before her. She tried to picture a sea of faces, but all she could feel was the silence of judgment. She spoke anyway. Halfway through her third attempt, she stumbled over her phrasing. The word for belonging came out, garbled. She stopped, frustrated. "I can't do this," she muttered. A soft voice echoed from the back of the room. "Then say that." She turned sharply. Kazuo stood near the entrance, leaning gently against the doorframe. His coat was still dusted with snow. Claire blinked. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," he said. "Say what you just said, out loud, to the room." She hesitated, cheeks flushing. He walked closer. "Say it, just once," she exhaled shakily. "I can't do this." Kazuo nodded. "Good. Now say the next true thing." Claire paused, then added, "But I want to." He smiled. "That's your opening?" She looked at him, her throat tight. "I don't want to disappoint anyone." "You won't." How do you know he stepped onto the stage, facing her, not the seats? "Because you're not performing. You're offering." Claire stared at him for a moment, then looked out toward the empty seats again. The next night she stood behind the curtain, heart pounding. The room wasn't huge, but it was full. Students, faculty, a handful of donors, even a few members of the press. Kazuo sat in the back, just where the light faded into shadow. But she could see him. She stepped forward. There was a pause. Then she began exactly as she had in rehearsal. "I'm not sure I'm ready to stand here, and that's the truth." Soft laughter rolled gently through the crowd. "But I also know that stories, real stories, are almost never shared when we feel perfect. They're shared when we feel brave." She took a breath and continued. She talked about Aspen, about serving coffee and wondering if life had passed her by, about the man no one saw until she did, about the moment he spoke to her in her language, and the way it changed everything. Claire didn't notice when the room went quiet. She didn't notice when tears threatened the corners of her eyes. She just kept speaking. Not flawlessly, but fully. When she finished, there was a pause. Then applause, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply, fully present. And in the back of the room, Kazuo didn't clap right away. He just watched her with eyes that said everything. You did it. You showed them who you are. Claire stepped off the stage and into the hallway, her hands still trembling. She leaned against the wall, breathless. Kazuo appeared beside her, a small envelope in his hand. "For you," he said. She opened it. Inside was a note. "You don't have to speak perfectly to speak powerfully. You just have to speak." Claire folded it carefully, holding it to her chest. Maybe she thought this was what it meant to belong, not to be flawless, but to be fully seen. And she had never felt more seen in her life. Claire watched the late winter sunlight filter through the windows of the quiet tea-house golden beams, stretching across the low wooden table where she sat. Steam curled from her cup of matcha, soft and fragrant. The center had given her the day off after the presentation, a quiet reward they hadn't said out loud, but she felt it. Their trust, their recognition. And yet her mind wasn't still. Kazuo hadn't called since the night of the talk. No message, no sudden visit. The note he'd handed her lingered in her bag. Its words burned into her memory, but silence followed. She stirred the tea slowly, her fingers lingering on the ceramic rim. He had pulled away before. She'd told herself not to expect consistency from a man whose entire life had been carefully fragmented into roles: CEO, grandson, outsider, wanderer. But still, after everything, she thought maybe he'd let himself stay. A soft chime broke her thoughts. She looked down. A message. "Kazuo, can you meet me tonight? There's something I want to show you, and something I need to say." Her heart skipped. She typed back quickly. "Claire, yes. Just tell me where." That evening, she arrived at an unfamiliar address on the outskirts of the city. A quiet district, residential but old. The buildings were traditional tiled roofs layered in snow. She followed a narrow stone path through a modest gate, heart-racing breath puffing in the chill. Kazuo stood just beyond it, waiting beside a weathered building with wide wooden doors and a fading hand-painted sign. Claire slowed, taking it all in. "What is this place?" she asked. He turned to her, his breath visible in the cold. "It was my grandfather's first school. He opened it after the war, a place for those who had lost homes and stories." She glanced up at the building again, now seeing the reverence in his eyes. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I didn't let anyone." Kazuo replied. "It's been closed for over a decade. After he died, I couldn't bring myself to step inside." Claire looked back at him. "So, why now?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Because last night after your talk, I went home. I sat alone. And I realized something." He handed her the paper. She opened it. It was a sketch, rough pencil lines of a building, a garden, and a wide-open space with lanterns strung from the trees. A community space. A school. A center. A place for stories. Claire looked up, her breath caught between wonder and disbelief. "You want to rebuild it? I want us to build it," Kazuo said. "Not just for me, not just for the past, but for the future. For anyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard. For people like your mother, like you, like me." Claire's throat tightened. "I didn't know how to say it," he continued. "I'm not used to asking for help without a contract or transaction. But this, I can't do it alone. And I don't want to." She was silent for a long moment. "Then, you said there was something you needed to say." Kazuo nodded slowly. "I love you, Claire." The words didn't echo. They settled warm and quiet between them. Her lips parted, but the air caught in her throat. "I know it's messy," he said. "I know I've pulled away. I know I'm learning late, but that doesn't make it less true." She looked at him, eyes full. "You're not the only one learning late." He took a tentative step closer. "Then maybe we keep learning. Together." Claire let out a shaky laugh. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" "I am," Kazuo said, voice steady. For once, I want to build something that doesn't hide who I am. And I want you beside me, not just in Tokyo, but in whatever comes next." She reached out, fingers lacing through his. "Then, let's do it. Let's build something real." Kazuo's eyes searched hers. "Even if it takes time, especially if it takes time," she whispered. In the soft glow of the courtyard lantern, with the past behind them and possibility ahead, Claire leaned in. And for the first time, nothing held them back. Not the silence, not the fear, just the start of something deeply true. Spring came slowly to Tokyo, as if the city itself needed time to thaw from all it had held in through the winter. The plum blossoms arrived first, fragile and bold. Then the cherry trees followed, tentative at first, then all at once. Claire stood barefoot on the worn wooden floor of the old schoolhouse, now emptied and freshly swept. The walls still carried the scent of cedar and thyme. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon light. Outside wind chimes sang gently in the breeze. A low stack of sketches sat on the floor beside her floor plans, garden layouts, paint swatches, all marked with sticky notes in Kazuo's handwriting. She walked slowly through the space, picturing it alive again. Students sitting in circles, storytellers sharing in soft voices, laughter echoing down the hall, a place where silence meant listening, not absence. Behind her, the door creaked open. Kazuo stepped in, brushing cherry blossom petals from his shoulder. He carried a small paper bag and a rolled blueprint under one arm. "You're early," Claire said, turning with a soft smile. "You always beat me here," he replied, walking over. "Thought I'd try catching up for once." She eyed the bag. "What's that?" "From the cafe down the street," he said, setting it down. "The woman at the counter insists we try her matcha cheesecake or she'll never speak to me again." Claire laughed, the sound filling the empty room like music. "I think she ships us," Kazuo added. "She does," Claire said, taking a seat on the floor. "She told me last week, said we look like a final chapter." He sat beside her, cross-legged, facing the same direction she was, toward the windows, toward the future. "I've been thinking," he said after a pause. Claire glanced sideways. "Uh-oh, about what we're calling this place." She leaned back on her palms. "You still want to name it after your grandfather?" Kazuo shook his head. "No, I want to name it after what changed me." She looked at him, a slow blush rising to her cheeks. "Kazuo," he cut her off gently. "Not your name, your words." She blinked. He unrolled a small sign mock-up from the tube. Handwritten brush strokes in both English and Japanese. Kotoba. "Words," Claire read quietly. Kazuo nodded. "Because everything shifted the moment you spoke to me in my own language. Not just Japanese, but real words. Honest words. And now, that's what we're giving people. A place where their voice matters." Claire swallowed hard. "It's beautiful." He met her eyes. "You taught me that words can pull someone back from the edges." Her throat tightened. She reached over and placed her hand over his. "And you taught me that silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it's waiting for the right time to speak." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Claire whispered, "I think I'm ready." Kazuo looked at her. "For what?" She smiled, eyes soft. "To call this home." His lips parted and something deep flickered in his expression. Relief, awe, love. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder, letting the silence fill with meaning. Outside, children laughed in the distance. The scent of sakura drifted through the open window. It wasn't flashy or grand, but it was real. Later that night, after they'd shared cheesecake and made 100 new notes for the next renovation step, Claire wrote a letter to her mother. "Mom, You once told me that love isn't always loud. It's sometimes the quiet invitation to stay. I think I've found that kind of love. Not just with someone else, but within myself. I wish you could see this place. I wish you could hear the way the wind moves through the paper walls, or how the lanterns flicker like they remember. I think you'd love it here. You always said I was stronger than I believed. You were right. I just needed time and the right people to believe it, too. Love, Claire. When she sealed the envelope, she didn't cry. She smiled. Because for the first time, she wasn't running from anything. She was rooted. And the story she was writing, no longer someone else's, was just beginning.